It was a regular Thursday. I went to work, was thinking of Shabbos, cooking, cleaning, not knowing that this 5 seconds, it changed our life.
Ari managed to slightly injure the terrorist, and only when Ari saw that he wasn't going to hurt anybody else, that's when Ari allowed himself to fall.
There's a split second of silence. And it's not the silence that you hear in the summertime when the crickets are out. It's literally the silence of death all around you.
At a certain time we could hear thumps of boots upstairs. Hannah later said that moment she's thought, I'm gonna die now, they're coming to kill me because I'm Jewish, this is it.
One of the things that gives us some kind of nechama is planting more and more fields. We call them Kerem Hallel, the Hallel vineyards.
He would get off the plane and kneel down on the ground and kiss the ground every single time. He had such an appreciation for Eretz Yisrael, such a love for this land.
Because this is the essence of who we are as the Jewish people, that when something is happening, we worry about everybody.
In every good deed that we do, that he has a zchut in that. Any mitzvot I do, he has a zchut in that because I'm alive because of him.
I think that all of us have been through such difficult situations here in terms of terrorism, in terms of the impact and the long-term impact of that, which, as we know, it doesn't go away. You know, an attack happens in an instant, but the impact lasts a lifetime for not only the victims, but the family members and the extended family. It's not a one-size-fits-all, and everyone deals with it very differently.
My name is Rina Ariel. I live in Kiryat Arba in Israel. I was born in the States, but my parents made Aliyah in 1970, like after the Six-Day War. And since then, we live in Israel. 7 years ago exactly, an Arab terrorist, a guy 17 years old, jumped over the fence where we live. We live basically in an isolated house in the outskirts of Kiryat Arba. My husband makes wine, so we have vineyards around us. And 7 years ago, as I said, an Arab terrorist jumped over the fence surrounding Kiryat Arba, ran through the vineyards, entered our house. My daughter, my oldest daughter, Hallel, was sleeping in bed, okay, calm. She was 13 and a half, and the Arab just came in and slaughtered her. He waited in the house, not knowing what's going on. My husband is part of a special group. In Hebrew, it's called Kitat Konenut. It's civilians, very well trained, working with the army to help protect the Israeli settlements. He got a message that something happened, but nobody knew exactly what. My husband runs home with 2 additional friends, and they entered the house, not knowing what to expect. Amichai ran to the room because he knew Hallel was the only one to be there. And he saw Hallel dead, and he started screaming. My husband never screams. The Arab terrorist, the young guy, heard my husband, came out with a huge knife this size, wanting to kill my husband too. So meanwhile, the second guy that was searching the living room heard the scream, ran and saw the terrorist and managed to shoot him. The terrorist fell down and he was dead, but one of the bullets hit the wall, bounced down and entered the other guy's head and exit through the eye. So Shuki, the third warrior, lost his eye in the same incident. So the terrorist was gone, Hallel was murdered, my husband was saved, Shuki lost his eye. This whole thing took a couple of seconds. And that day changed our life. Hallel was 13 and a half. She was a pure young girl, just starting to live. It was a regular Thursday. I went to work, was thinking of Shabbos, cooking, cleaning, not knowing that this 5 seconds of an evil, pure Arab terrorist coming in, it wasn't an incident, it wasn't something, it was pure evil, entering our house, slaughtering my daughter like they did in the ancient times, and it changed our life.
I always say that this is bigger than me. It's not just about me, it's about everyone. And that for me, therapeutically, it's definitely sharing my story, because every time I share my story, I'm sharing the story of those 17 innocent people on my bus that didn't get to go home to their family that day. And therefore, their story and their memory and who they were stays alive through that. And I think that it's important that that we remember everybody. Everyone's an individual. And especially what you said about us being Jews, that those that have been murdered, it wasn't just a car accident, it wasn't, and those are all horrific things as well. But this was something planned and calculated to murder somebody just because of who they are.
My name is Miriam Folt. I live in Efrat in Israel. My husband, Ari Folt, was murdered by a 16-year-old Arab terrorist. It was 2 days before Yom Kippur, September 16th, 2018, Zayin v'Tishrei. And I went to work in Yerushalayim, and I told Ari to get some shopping done before Yom Kippur, Sukkot. Get it done now. We had a lot of guests coming. Ari went to Tzomet Agush, where there's a Rami Levi. He first went into one building to get something for his cousin. And when he came out, he was walking around the building on the sidewalk, around the parking lot, to go into the supermarket. And 16-year-old Arab terrorist saw him, jumped on him from behind, and stabbed him in the back. Without thinking, Ari turned around. The terrorist started to flee, to run towards the neighboring mall. Ari started to run after him while yelling, "Pigua, pigua." He jumped over a wall and then pulled out his gun to shoot at the terrorist. In the meantime, some other people sort of noticed what was going on. There was another bus driver there who also pulled out a gun. Ari managed to slightly injure the terrorist. One of his bullets grazed the terrorist's neck, but enough that the terrorist fell. And some people who were there held him down to make sure he didn't get up. And only when Ari saw that he wasn't going to hurt anybody else, that's when Ari allowed himself to fall. And the wound was severe. The knife had severed through his main artery and his lung. And by the time he dropped, there was just no blood left in his body. And he died on the way to the hospital. Ari said a lot of things, but I like to quote him because I can't say it any better. Ari was once did a live video speaking to people in Chutz La'aretz, and he was telling them, don't be afraid, you should all come to Israel. But one very important thing, which reminded me what you just said, Rina, is he said, when we read the Tanakh and we walk in the steps of the Nevi'im and our forefathers in this country, this is the future of the Jewish people. This is where we belong. And I think that to take it a little bit further, the fact that we are all sitting here telling our stories and remembering these people, this is how we go forward to tomorrow and the day after and the day after. The inspiration of these people is what inspires others to move forward and inspires others to continue or to do. I always say people love to do. Sometimes they just need an excuse. Mm-hmm. And all of these people that we're remembering here is giving our excuse to do something, to right. Keep their memories alive.
It's interesting you say of how to go forward, because I think people don't understand always that, some people will say, aren't you over this yet? Or why haven't you moved on from it? Mine was 20 years this past week. And I think that you don't move on. We learn how to cope with what's happened and move forward because that's who we are. You know, I feel it more than ever when I'm here, the resilience in the country. And resilience is a very interesting word because everyone automatically thinks that resilience means that you're okay, that everything's okay. And I don't think that everything is ever okay. I think that this is something that none of us asked to happen to us, but it happened, and now we have to figure out how to move forward as best we can with life. My name is Sari Singer. I am originally from New Jersey. On the morning of 9/11, I overslept that morning and wasn't downtown in my office, which was approximately 2 blocks away from the World Trade Center. I remember waking up and jumping out of bed and trying to see what the weather was like outside, but I couldn't tell. So I turned on the television, and all of a sudden I saw a picture of the towers burning. I immediately called my office. I heard some screaming in the background, and the person on the phone told me that we were being evacuated, that they didn't know what happened, but that the building shook and that everyone was being told they need to leave the building immediately. And in the first few days back, I remember the smells of downtown Manhattan, and you could really smell it all over Manhattan of the burning. And I really felt uneasy about being in New York, and I felt like I had to do something. So I decided to quit my job and to move to Israel and to volunteer with organizations that were working with victims of terrorism. For the first 10 months, I volunteered and I loved it. Everyone always asked me if, why did I love doing this? This was my dream job, to be a professional volunteer. And unfortunately, as the 10 months were hitting, my money was running low, and my parents were getting very excited because they knew that I was coming back to the States. But a week before the flight that I was supposed to leave, a friend of mine reached out and said that one of the schools that she was working in was looking for an administrator, and she thought I should apply. And so a few days before the flight, I canceled my ticket after I was offered the job, and I decided to stay. And I decided if I wanted to live here, that I really wanted to feel like I was living in Israel and not just a tourist. And so I ended up really trying to engross myself in life here. I took 2 buses to work in the morning from Katzimon, where I lived, all the way to Har Nof, and 2 buses home. And I really loved living here. There's nothing that I felt was greater privilege and honor to be living here in Israel. And then on June 11th, 2003, I always say it was a day that changed my life forever. I remember that day like it was yesterday. It was beautiful out. It reminded me a lot of the morning of 9/11. The sun was shining. My students were just finishing the day before their academics, and they were all flying back to the States to go home to their families for the summer. And so I really didn't have to be in the school building, and I made meetings all over the city. And my last meeting of the day was in Givat Shaul, right outside of Har Nof, where I work. But when I arrived at the office, I remembered that I was meeting a friend for dinner at Cafe Hillel in the German colony, and I never knew what bus to take there because it was so close to my apartment that I used to walk there. So I called her up and I asked what bus to take, and she said I could catch the number 14 bus right at the bus station. And I remember boarding the bus. It was crowded. I saw 2 seats open up right in front of me. They were on the right-hand side of the bus, the last 2 seats in the front section. And normally I would have taken the aisle seat because at Machane Yehuda, always there's so many people that get on with packages that are older that I would have wanted to get up for somebody, but for some reason that day, and I'm not sure why, I ended up moving in next to the window seat. I remember the girl who sat down next to me and our boyfriend that was standing, and I know that if I didn't take that window seat, I wouldn't be here today. So as the bus started moving, and I remember my knapsack was on the floor, I always carried my knapsack with me with my purse inside of it. And my cell phone back then in 2003 was quite large. It was a very bulky, heavy cell phone. And I had just gotten off the phone with my friend when I sat down in the seat. So I decided that I wanted to put my cell phone in my bag. So I remember leaning over in the seat slightly, bending my head down, opening up my knapsack, and dropping my phone inside. And as I went to close my knapsack, I felt this huge shock wave hit me. And the only way to explain how the shock wave feels like, it's like 2 pieces of metal that hit so hard against each other and vibrate back. That's what I remember my body feeling like. I remember trying to lift my hands up to my face, and my hands were being pulled all the way down, and my body was being pulled back against the seat. And when the blast stopped, I couldn't open my left eye at all because it had already been swollen shut. And my right eye I could barely open, just enough to see the roof of the bus had fallen in and the man's head in front of me, and he wasn't moving. And I remember after the blast, there's a split second of silence. And it's not the silence that you hear in the summertime when the crickets are out. It's literally the silence of death all around you. It's a split second, but it feels like so much longer. And right after that silence, my ears started ringing really loud and I started screaming. And luckily I was screaming because from 3 blocks away, this guy heard the blast and he came running towards the burning bus. And it always reminds me of that morning on 9/11 when I watched on television as thousands of people ran from the towers to get to safety. Because in America, we're taught that if there is something going on, if there's a problem or there's an emergency, we need to let the first responders, the firemen, the police members get in and take care of the problem. But in Israel, it doesn't matter if you're the police or Magen David Adom. Everybody comes running to help because you're a human being in need. This guy heard the blast. He didn't know what it was. He was a few blocks away and he came running. Because in Israel, Israelis run to the problems, not away from it. And he came towards the burning bus and he heard me screaming. And he said, "You have to get out of the bus." And I said, "I can't." He said, "Put your feet up on the bar next to you," which I thought was the window of the bus. But later I saw pictures and it was the bottom of the bus that had been blown out from the impact of the blast. And he and another man, I don't know how they did it, but they pulled me through this small hole and brought me to the side of the road where this old woman waited with me and was making sure that I was awake, asking me questions. And I kept thinking, she's not the police, she's not Magen David Adom, but she's here waiting with me as if she were waiting as a mother for her child to get help. And I just thought that in this most difficult time for me, the most horrific thing I'd ever been through in my life, where I had no family around me at all, I had all this family that I didn't know existed. And this was really, for me, the essence of what I feel about Israel. That in this time, these people were there for me that didn't know me. They had no reason to be there for me, but they were taking care of me as if I were one of their family members. And for me, the experience was very, very fast. For many victims, it feels like forever until help was going to arrive. I had shrapnel that went through my left shoulder, breaking my clavicle bone. Both my eardrums were blown from the impact of the blast. My hair was burned, my face was burned and bruised, my legs were badly cut up, they think, from metal from the bus, and I have shrapnel in my mouth that's inoperable. And that's lucky because on that day, over 100 of us were injured on and off the bus, and 17 innocent people, including everyone seated and standing around me, did not survive.
Yeah, I think my story is a little bit different from yours because mine happened outside of Israel. And therefore, that sense of togetherness that you might have felt was different for us. So I completely agree with you. This was never about my family. It was never about our trauma. This was about what is it like to be a Jew in Denmark today. My name is Mette Miriam Bentov. I am from Copenhagen, Denmark. I am the very fortunate mother of 3 wonderful children and 2 boys and a girl. And in 2015, we were celebrating our daughter Hannah's bat mitzvah. It was actually supposed to be in 2014, but my mother passed away and we decided to postpone Hannah's bat mitzvah. So the date was the 14th of February in 2015. And Hannah held a speech in the synagogue after service, a beautiful speech about how proud she was to be both Danish and Jewish, how much it meant to her that Sweden had taken in her grandmother and great-grandparents during the war, that it was important to do mitzvot, to care about your fellow man. And with those beautiful words, we went home to rest and to come back to the community center adjacent to the synagogue, Motzei Shabbat. While we were home, there was an attack in another place in Copenhagen. A terrorist had planned an attack on the powder keg. He managed to shoot off, kill one person, and injure 5 police officers. But he unfortunately also managed to carjack a car and flee. And Motzei Shabbat, the kids and I went into the synagogue to prepare for the guests, and we were met by one of the Jewish security guards. They'd called in 2 other Jewish security guards, of course, all 3 of them unarmed. But they had also managed to convince the police to show up with 1 patrol car. So by the time our guests arrived, my sister said to me, "Do you know that there are police outside?" I thought, yeah, but that's because of what had happened earlier. So we went along with our party, guests eating, speeches, and around 11 o'clock, most of the older guests and those with very small children started to leave, and we closed off the room with a kind of a mechitza so that we could dance on one side, and those who would want to sit and talk on the other side could do that. And I was in the other room dancing with Hannah and her friends, and we were listening to Tel Aviv of Omer Adam when one of the security guards came in and he shouted, "Shut down the music." And I could see from his face expression that this was not a debate, and we struggled to actually close the music. And by the time we'd done that, he came in again and he said, "Everybody in the basement now, go." And you know, I was in a room with, I don't know, 15, 12-year-olds who started screaming and crying, and we ran towards the basement. I went into the other part of the room and asked people, you know, to go to the basement, and we were standing down there. The kids were really scared. One of them were hyperventilating. She just spent the summer in Ashkelon in a safety room because of Katyushas from Gaza. Another kid was, he looked like he was about to faint, and everyone were really, what is going on? This is odd. And the security guard came, took my husband aside, gave him a radio, said to him, "I'm going to lock you in a room now for you to hide. We are under attack. One of ours have been hit. And you have to stay in the room until the police can come and take you out." At a certain time, we could hear thumps of boots upstairs, and Hannah later said that moment she's thought, "I'm going to die now. They're coming to kill me because I'm Jewish. This is it. This is the end of my 12-year-old life." And a lot of the other kids felt the same. And I think us adults also thought, okay, this is it. But it was, in fact, the police. And we were hiding in the basement for around 3 hours before the police came down, and we were allowed to get out of the room. And they said, "You are going to be evacuated. You're going to be taken out, and you'll be taken to a safe place where someone will explain to you what has happened." And I had to leave exit first, and my husband as the last, to make sure that everyone was out. And I was standing there with my 8-year-old, and at that time, seeing armed people, armed police officers is not a regular thing. It wasn't a regular thing. And here there were 2 SWAT team. You could only see this, dressed in black, Kevlar vests, and they were standing with huge guns pointing out into the dark. And I'm like, "You want me to exit with my 8-year-old? I don't think so." And Elias looked at it and he said, "Whoa, that's a big gun." And the police officer took his mask down and he said, "And I'm using it to take extra good care of you." What had happened outside while we were hiding was that the same terrorist from the attack earlier in the day had gone somewhere in Copenhagen. He had been on an internet cafe to search new targets. He had seen on the community website that there was a party, a bat mitzvah party. He had gotten new weapons, 2 guns, a knife and an axe, a change of clothes, and was on his way to the synagogue. He was surprised to find that not only were there a security guard outside, there were also 2 police officers. But he went up, shot the security guard point blank. He died on the spot, opened fire against the police, who, one, dropped his ammunition from his gun, so he didn't get any shots off. He was hurt in his shoulder. The other one was hurt in his foot. He did manage to get some shots off. They were shooting at each other, and then he fled. So the security guard who was killed, Dano's son, Zichrono Livracha, he was called a gentle giant. He was very tall, above 2 meters. He had been volunteering as a security guard for 15 years in the community. He was actually also a guard at our wedding, where his sister was a bridesmaid, she was at the wedding. His parents are the most wonderful people in the world, Serge and Bodil, very active members of the community. Andrea, his sister, they're just beautiful people. Dan was the kind of person who did grocery shopping for his elderly neighbor just because, he could and it was difficult for her. He was such a non-judgmental, kind-hearted, good guy, just through and through a good guy, who had been doing, voluntary work for the community for 15 years, standing guard at events, weddings, bar mitzvahs, even just the weekly service on Shabbat. And he was honored in many ways after the attack by the Danish government, parliament, alongside the other person who was killed at the attack earlier that day, Finn Nørgaard. Yeah.
And I'm just wondering how you feel about, because I always get upset when, not upset in the sense that I'm angry because I think people don't always understand it, but how do we move forward? How do we move to the next stage and cope with what we've been through as Jews and as people, I say now because you're all living in Israel. So as people who live in Israel and knowing that these things happen, unfortunately, more often than not, how do we move and cope and move forward from this?
I think when you have children, siblings who lost their sister, children who lost their father, for me it's different, but children who went through massive trauma, or if it's a young girl in Israel, I think you need to find the place of it's okay not to be okay. It's a very, very difficult life lesson because I think maybe as women, maybe as mothers, maybe as human beings, we want to fix. We don't want hurt.
Right.
So we rush to comfort, stop crying your kid. But you know what? Sometimes you need to cry. And I think it took me a long time to say to myself, it's okay not to be okay. And for resilience, the past year I've been going through recovery from breast cancer. And having experienced other terrorist attacks, I have come to the conclusion that I decide how I react to the things that happens to me in my life.
Right.
And I kick tuchus. And nothing is going to get me down. And it's okay not to be okay. It doesn't mean I'm weak. It doesn't mean that I don't have power. It doesn't mean that I'm not empowered. And that's okay. It's all okay. It doesn't mean that what we experience or the trauma, that isolated episode is okay. Obviously, it's not okay. But how you react to it, how you deal with it, that's in your hands. Everything else is in God's hands. So that's your responsibility. Obviously, losing a child is the worst fear of any parent. So I can't speak for how I would ever deal with that. But it's,
I
yeah.
feel we have both. It's like I'm always holding two balls in my hand. It's always living together. And one of them could be, it means the emotions and reactions could be combined. It could be happy and sad in the same moment. How could it be? It could be. I could go forwards and backwards in the same moment. And I think understanding it, that's always complicated. Many years in Israel, they used to take the TV and they split it into half and they used to show news and a football game. They stopped it, it was a while. And people used to go nuts. How do you do it? But this is the way I live. It's like a news and a football game at the same time. Because like I have to wake up in the morning and my kid wants to go to a birthday party. But I don't feel part of it. Or Purim. They want to wear costumes and they want to have a happy thing. But for me, it's like closer to Tisha B'Av. So you put on, it's not living on a false level. It's living on a deeper level, knowing it's both. But I feel there's a secret of just learning to be proactive. If I can find something that I could do, not only the things that are done, but something that I could take charge and be proactive. It could be something very, very small. It could be something big. So I move myself from this, sand that could just sink you into a different place. And sometimes it could be, not long ago we went swimming in the Kinneret, swim for the Sadna, an amazing project. You did it too? Yes. This time? Yeah. I didn't see you. Wait. We have to catch things. And it was an amazing project. And I did it because I felt I'm doing something good for, the world, but I felt I'm doing something good for myself too. And a week after, I was in a situation where I felt it's pushing me down and I had to stop. I had to take myself out of it. And when I know I could choose, no matter where and what, I always can make one choice, it gives me the power that I'm continuing. Like no Arab is going to push me down. No 17-year-old guy is going to step on me. No matter what, I can always find a step. It's going to be a small one. We had to think what's going on now, how to continue. And the first thing was we have to stay where we are. Amichai is a farmer, he plants grapes. As I said, we live surrounding vineyards. We have a vineyard, we make wine, Hallel's wine. So one of the things that gives us some kind of nechama is planting more and more fields. We call them Kerem Hallel, the Hallel vineyards, and making the Hallel wine. And when people come to our visiting center, see the land, see what it means living in the outskirts of Kiryat Arba Hebron, understanding what does it mean to stay, and drinking the wine, I think it does something. Hallel was only 13 and a half. She wasn't a warrior or a soldier, any brave guy that has, a story. She was a girl. So we started working on these bat mitzvah programs, and one of the things we did is a special mother and daughter's book for the whole year bat mitzvah. We call it Pirkei Hallel. So when I see mothers and daughters, we have it in Hebrew and English, sitting together and learning, it does a lot. I just had 2 years ago during COVID, my second girl had a bat mitzvah, and this year my youngest one is also having, and we're soon going to start learning. So I'm soon going to be a mother learning the book that we wrote. And we have bat mitzvah tours and bat mitzvah visits. So this whole thing of bringing Hallel's light. Just a couple weeks ago, we had a dancing performance also in memory of Hallel. And she didn't dance, but her sisters, my 2 daughters, did. So I think living with this life and death and going forwards and backwards and coming up and this is our story from then on. This is what we do. People ask me, what's this? And this is a piece of jewelry we made after Hallel was murdered. We call it Hallel Gate, Shar Hallel. You see the picture of Bet HaMikdash and a gate. And since Hallel was murdered, we go up once a month in a memory to Har Bayit, according to the rabbis that agree. My husband is a Kohen. I'm married to a Kohen, but my father also was a Kohen, and we feel that living in Kiryat Arba Hebron and going up to Jerusalem is part of the story. This is a story that we live. We are always on the route of Hebron, Jerusalem, Hebron, Jerusalem. So just on her 7th Yortite, that was just not long ago, we went up also. There's more than 50 people joining us, and every month we go up in a memory, and we believe this is part of the Jewish story.
Everything that Ari stood for was to serve and protect Am Yisrael be'eretz Yisrael al pi Torat Yisrael. That's what Ari stood for. Ari had a 4th degree black belt in Torah Dojo Karate. He taught a lot of self-defense classes. The chinuch in his life was so strong. He was a mechanech at heart. For many, many, many years, he taught as a 4th grade, 6th grade mechanech in many schools throughout Yerushalayim. Always, always, always teaching. When social media was up and coming, Ari saw this as an opportunity to spread the word, to spread the truth, to reach far and wide, to reach as many people as possible. And he would always come into the house and say, "You're not going to believe who liked my post, and you're not going to believe who commented. This guy from Saudi Arabia and this other guy from Taiwan." And he was so proud. It wasn't in a selfish way. To him, it was, if I can reach those people, imagine how much farther I can reach. How far I can spread the truth about who we are and what we are. And he was so proud. There's something that Ari did every single time he came back to Israel. He would get off the plane and kneel down on the ground and kiss the ground every single time. He had such an appreciation for Eretz Yisrael, such a love for this land. Since that day, we still get messages. I can't even count the amount of children that were named after Ari, people who saw an opportunity to keep his memory alive, to instill that inspiration in their children. I think Ari's story inspires so many people to fight for what you believe in, to stand up for what's true. We started a nonprofit organization called the Ari Fold Project in Ari's memory. Unfortunately, Ari never slept. He did the job of 20 people, and now we're trying to continue what he started, to not only support Toshvei Eretz Yisrael, settlers in Israel, but also to support IDF soldiers. We donate things to units, whether it's fleeces or water packs or defibrillators to Hatzalah or ATVs, to anything that we can do, again, to support Am Yisrael in Eretz Yisrael, to support the IDF, who stands day and night protecting us and serving.
I remember waiting in the hospital by myself. I didn't want the nurses or the doctors to call my parents because they didn't know what I looked like before. And I didn't want a stranger to tell my parents that I was okay, because this I knew was going to be their worst nightmare. So I told the doctors that I wanted to wait until someone who knew me could be there so they could call my family. And so as I'm waiting by myself, and the way it was set up back then was there were beds and curtains, rows and rows of beds and curtains. And I remember after the doctors left, a few minutes later, this old Temani woman came in, and she said, "My son is a few curtains down. He was on the bus. He said to his mother that he remembered getting on the bus with an American girl who was talking on her cell phone. And he said to his mother, maybe she doesn't have any family, maybe she's by herself, go check on her." And I thought, here's an 18 or 19-year-old kid, doesn't know me, never had a conversation with me. He's injured himself, and he's sending his mother to check in on me. Because this is the essence of who we are as the Jewish people, that when something is happening, we worry about everybody. And this was a scenario for the next hour. Another man came in and said, "My daughter is on the bus. She was badly injured. She's in surgery right now. I speak English. If she were by herself, I would want someone to take care of her. What can I do for you? And I just felt that in this situation, all these people that had their own family members to worry about, they were also taking care of me as well. And while I think that that, was the end of my story, that was truly the beginning, because while I had no control over what happened to me that day, I believe that I won't have control over how I live my life going forward. And I want to show the world love and kindness instead of the hate that that day was all about. And so in 2012, I founded a nonprofit organization called Strength to Strength, where we work with victims of terrorism around the world, bringing them together with peer-to-peer support. We work with existing organizations on the ground in 15 different countries to make sure that victims of terrorism, civilian victims of terrorism, know that they're not alone, that they have people that understand what they've been through, and that they have a voice. And we basically build a global peer support group for victims, working with our partner organizations. And this organization to me is very personal because there was nothing around for me when I returned to the US. I had a lot of support when I lived here in Israel. I did live in Israel a year after the attack. But once I returned to the United States, I didn't have that support. And so I had to find that myself, and that support came through the other victims that I met in Strength to Strength and the other victims that I've met all over the world. And I think it's really important that when people go through something like this, that there's that connection of people that really understand what you've been through, and that you know that you're not alone, and that there are people around that can help you if you need it.
We did Aliyah a year and a half ago, yeah. Our two eldest wanted to serve in the army. It was really important for them. And I didn't want them to be Chayalim Bodidim. Then a job opportunity came that the company I work for were opening an office in Tel Aviv, and kind of the Lego parts kind of came together. So they are currently two of my kids are currently serving in the army. That was what was important for us to talk about. And it was important, and it still is, to carry the memory of Dan, and who died protecting us, with us. We light a Shabbos candle for him every Friday. He has a small memorial here in Yair Lanot, next to Netanya. We go there from time to time. When my son will have his Masa Kumta in a month, the father of Dan will put the kumta on him. This is important to us. It helps us in a way. I wanted to say heal, but to be honest, that's not the right word. But it helps us in the meaninglessness to find some meaning. To remember Dan, in every good deed that we do, that he has a zchut in that. Any mitzvot I do, he has a zchut in that because I'm alive because of him. So when someone remembers your daughter, or when someone remembers Ari, and here 4 years later, people are still reaching out and remembers stories. I have my own story with Ari. That matters. And then again, as I said, for me, in the days and months after, it was important for me to tell the rest of the Danish society, this is what it's like to be Jewish in Denmark. This is what we have to live with, and you never have to live with. So there's a little bit of a difference there, but in sense of healing.
Metzi and I were just speaking about this before, that the earth keeps turning. And the sun is going to rise tomorrow, whether you like it or not. And you need to figure out a way how to keep moving with it. And we all develop our own coping mechanisms, how to get out of bed in the morning, how to get dressed, how to go, along with with mundane, things in life. I think we have no choice. Yeah. This is not something that we chose, like we said.
I think a part of the complete loss of control, that is, from a therapeutic point of view, this is what you need to grapple with, that complete loss of control of something major happening in your life. And I think most women I know are somewhat control freaks. It happens to you. It happens to you. That's the thing. And it's our youngest son once said, we had to go to Askara for Dan. And he said, I don't want to go. Everyone's going to be sad and upset. And it's all we are. That tarot has completely defined our life. It's all that we are. And he's allowed to feel that way. But as I said to him, it's not who we are. It's a part of the journey of our lives. It's a part of the story that is you. The pieces of puzzles that make up Elias is that part of what happened in Elias's life when he was 8 years old was this horrible thing. And it doesn't compels you to be better than everyone else. It doesn't compel you to do, but if you can try and find positivity, if you can try and do to action, I think for us it was extremely important to tell them that hate is not going to help them. It's not going to make them better people. There's no reason. There is maybe reason, but there is no benefits of hating anyone for what has happened to them, for them in their lives. And we need to find some other source of energy to move forward in life.
Isn't this what we do as Jews?
Maybe it is. Yeah.
We fast, we remember Tisha B'Av.
Correct.
Right?
Right.
Yeah.
But then the next day we get up and we keep moving forward.
Yeah.
It's what we do.
It comes
who we
out
are.
in the middle of the summer vacation, Tisha B'Av.
Yeah.
And like you have to stop everything and then the next day continue. So this is it.
And I think it's important what you said about, I always say that the terrorist attack was something that happened in my life, but it doesn't define who I am or what I do in the future. Only we have control over how we deal with things going forward from something like this. And I think that, the interesting part is, and Rena, you said it, is that you can be sad and it can be difficult and hard, but you can also be happy at times. And I think that sometimes people think, and they mistake that when we're happy or we laugh or that we seem that everything's okay.
We're over it.
We're over it,
Yeah.
and that we're not thinking about it. I don't think a day goes by where I don't think about what happened. But again, I have two choices. I could be the victim that the terrorists want and not live my life and not do things, or I can take that pain and make sure that I'm doing something to make the world better from all that hate that we've all experienced.
I can say that for my children, as a direct result from that Palestinian terrorists, there are now 3 new soldiers for IDF because my 2 eldest volunteered and so will my youngest. As a direct result,
It's amazing.
you actually just made it worse.
It's amazing.
So it's, as you say, take the koach that you can, and yeah.
So connecting this to Tisha B'Av, what message would you like to leave or to send out to people in the world today in terms of what we've been through and how to take the lessons and, connect it more for people to really feel the day better?
I can share a story. A story that happened before even Hallel was born. I was a student and I was working in an old age home, working with the old people. And Tisha B'Av was, I think, Motzei Shabbos. And we were supposed to take, everyone was like in wheelchairs, very old people. We were supposed to take them to this huge room so they could read the Megillah, Echa. And me and like myself and others, we were like rolling wheelchairs in the room, and came this rabbi and started reading and they're sitting there like 30 people, very old. None of them saw, none of them were able to really read. Some of them, the hands were shaking. And I'm standing and I'm saying, they can't do anything for Tisha B'Av. Just sit down and hold the Megillah. I could. I don't know what, but I could. I'm not in a wheelchair. Hopefully not. I'm not in a wheelchair and my hands are not shaking. No matter what, I could do something. And I think for us, it means a lot because after Hallel was murdered, we are very proactive in Har HaBayit. And I feel that anytime I go up, literally, sometimes we're 3 people, sometimes we're 10, sometimes we're 50, we go up in memory of Hallel, but the action that I'm proactive and I could do literally something with my feet, with my hands. And I think this is something that started from my parents because we made Aliyah. And everyone sitting here and everyone listening to us knows what it means to make Aliyah from America, from England, from places that you weren't kicked out of it. You chose to come. My parents chose to come to Israel as a young couple because they wanted to. They came from a place that was good, but they made one step. They went out their wheelchair. And I feel this is what I have to do, because sometimes when you are in such a trauma, you are in a wheelchair, an emotional wheelchair. But I made a promise to myself, I'll never be in a wheelchair in my life if it's up to me. So sometimes it's taking a small action. Walking in Har HaBayit for me is a memory of Hallel. It's saying nobody's going to win us. Other people have their own ways. For my husband, making the wine is taking himself out of the wheelchair. And I think this, for many years, Tisha B'Av was a horrible day. I didn't know what to do. Like, the only thing was, okay, you can't eat. You can't drink. You can't be happy. You can't listen to music. Okay. Now the notion changed. I could do something on Tisha B'Av. I don't know each time what, but I could do something, and I'm not in a wheelchair. And I think this is something that it's day in today, day after day.
There is something to be said about trying to make this world better. And I think the beautiful essence of Tikkun Olam, for me, which is for me the essence of Judaism, that's my personal view, to help make world a better place. We are also chosen people, but we're chosen to be the good example. And for me, watching my kids being good people, doing the right things, making a difference for Am Yisrael, that for me is a victory. And whether it's Tisha B'Av or every day the rest of the year, look, trauma is not going to go away, and we can try and make some sense of it, and we can try and make something meaningful out of it, and each to his own what that is, or each to her own what that might be. I would say that if you're struggling in your life, it's easy to say it's up to you how to handle it. It's easy to say, you don't decide what happens to you, you decide how to react to it. But it's not that simple for everyone. So I would encourage that on Tisha B'Av, when you sit and you do something good for your own soul and you try to purify your soul, you look to your fellow man and you look him in the eye, or in your fellow woman and look her in the eye, and you ask, but how are you really doing? Take responsibility for someone else as well. Sometimes those who are the loudest and smile and laugh the most are the people who are suffering the most. We have, as Jews, we have responsibility for one another. Let's do that. Let's help each other. And, there is an organization called Eitan that helps soldiers who are struggling mentally. And their motto is, even a weak moment doesn't mean that even the strongest person can have a weak moment. Mm-hmm. And you know what?
It's true.
Yeah, that's true. I consider myself a very strong person. But I also have weak moments. And to be embraced, to be lifted, to be uplifted, to be heard, to be seen, to be recognized, that I can do for someone else, that you can do, this we can do for each other. Just a hug.
Mm-hmm. Everybody has their own journey. I always feel like, after the attack, Tisha B'Av for me it always was a day I felt very disconnected. You're in the States, it's hot out. You don't want to be outside. You're fasting. You want to kind of, stay cool. You're not in shul like Yom Kippur. It's a very different type of day, and you're supposed to feel something. And what happens when you don't feel exactly what you think you're supposed to feel? But I think that it's, I always look at it, and I think I've said this on days when I've actually spoken on Tisha B'Av to groups, is that it's not about the eich, it's not the how, it's the day after Tisha B'Av that I want to focus on. What am I going to do after this? How am I going to make the difference? And I think that, for me, it's important that people understand that while everybody, we're going through this, but it's not enough to just go through something. We have to have action after it. Staying still and staying in that sort of victimized state, it's a hard thing. I don't think everybody can do that. Some people do stay in that state, but for me, I can't stay in that state. I've always have to be, okay, what am I doing? How am I making the difference? God gave me a second chance. I want to make sure I'm doing everything that I'm supposed to be doing while I'm still here. And so I think for me, Tisha B'Av, I'm thinking, okay, it's a day for us to remember and what the day is all about, but it's really the day after to focus on of what am I going to do after this destruction or the tragedy to make sure that those things don't happen again. And for me, that's really important. And I think that if my message can help somebody to get them to sort of want to do something, to be active, it could be something so small. It doesn't have to be something big. It could be helping your sibling with something. It could be helping your parents. It could be doing something in the community. Just something to show more love in the world. I think that for me, that sort of transforms the hate that I experienced that day.
Because it's tikkun olam.
Yeah.
It's literally repairing the world.
And I think also one thing I want to say, especially with what you said, Miriam, everything is at everyone's own pace. It's not a one size fits all, and everyone's at a different year of when their pigua happened. For me, it's 20 years, and I'm saying, it doesn't get easier, and I don't want to say that in that way, but life does move on, and we do move forward, and things shift and change, but it's with us every single day. And I think that it's important, and I really want to just say how much I appreciate that the three of you are here with this discussion with me, because it's hard. It's not an easy thing at all, but I think that you are the strongest women I know, and you give me tremendous chizuk in every conversation I have with each of you, and I think you give chizuk to a lot of people around the world, and that's very, very special. And I think the things that you've shared today are personal and they're meaningful, and that I only hope that everything today brings you a little bit, more comfort of knowing that you are making a difference and you are impacting people, and that our stories and that each of the stories need to be shared and always be remembered, especially those that are no longer here, because we're the ones to keep their memories alive and their stories alive. And I just want to thank you.
Thank you.